What's up, everybody? My name's Hassan Bayyan. I am the Farmyard and Main Valley area manager here at the Maryland Zoo.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hello, and welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. All right, y'all, so we are now well into the beginning of season 4, and we started off with a couple of really big names and some really interesting and different episodes. But at its core, the Rossifari podcast is all about sharing the incredible, passionate people that work at zoos and aquariums who might not have their names out there in the world, but who are absolutely amazing people. And today we are returning to those roots with one of the most inspiring keeper interviews I have ever shared with y'all. My guest today is the Barnyard manager of the Maryland Zoo. And I got to be honest with y'all. So when I reached out and got in touch with the PR people at the Maryland Zoo, specifically Mike, who is an absolutely incredible guy and just also happens to be a drummer, and gave me a really amazing experience. So thank you, sir. I was a little shocked when, whenever I talk to these people, there's always this moment of saying like, hey, so who do you think I should talk to? And they're like, who do you want to talk to? And one thing that I like to do is I like to say to people who really are connected to their staffs, who do you think would be great on this podcast? Now, the Maryland Zoo has some incredible animals. They have an absolutely wonderful elephant section. They have a state-of-the-art penguin area that also features pelicans. I mean, they had, oh my goodness, gorillas, right? I mean, there was the whole thing early in the pandemic with Maisie, which you are going to hear a little bit more about here. There were just all these different things that I thought I was going to get told, hey, you could talk to somebody here. And instead, Mike was like, I've got the perfect person for you. And then mentioned the Barnyard. And look, I love goats. Goats are great. We talk a lot about goats in this episode. But I was really taken aback for a second. But then I thought to myself, well, if this dude is the best dude to represent the Maryland Zoo on this podcast for their first time on here, he must really be something special. And he is. This is an absolutely awesome story about an alternative way to get into zookeeping and about what makes zoos so amazing at a very personal level. I love this episode so much, and I can't wait to share this interview with you. So real quick, before we get to that, please make sure you've hit subscribe. Please make sure that you, are following along on the socials at Rossifari or at Rossifari Pod on TikTok. And if you have the chance to leave a rating or review, it helps other people find the podcast and hear the incredible interviews that I do, like the one you're about to hear. So without further ado, let's get to that one.
Basically, what I do is all kinds of stuff.
All right. Well, we will talk about that. So how long have you been at the zoo?
So I've been here at the zoo for almost a year now, but I've been working professionally with animals for about 10, and every day is a good day at the zoo.
All right. Well, I'm confused how you've been working with animals professionally for 10 years when you don't look like you're old enough to be doing that, but maybe just being with the animals keeps you young. I don't know. But so tell me about your history. How did you did you know that you wanted to work with animals when you were young?
Absolutely. So one thing about me, my grandma used to tell this really hilarious story about how I was knee-high to a grasshopper, and I came in a room and I basically said, hey, Mama, did you know that bats and dolphins can see what they're hearing using echolocation? Now, obviously, this was just something that I parroted from a TV show I was watching, but it was so impactful to me that I had to tell the most important person in my life at the time, hey, there is this cool thing. Did you know about this? And so I say that to say I've been passionate about nature before I even knew what passion was, or before I could even really articulate that. But for me, it wasn't until I was able to get an education position working at a safari park in Jersey that I really was able to find out, like, hey, this is for me in every way, shape, and form.
That's awesome. Did you go to school for it, or how did you get into that first gig? 'Cause that's always the question.
Excellent question. So I graduated from the streets with no diploma.
All right.
But what I did was I went to Six Flags Great Adventure in Jersey for a security job initially, but they said, hey, you have to choose 3 different jobs. And so I was like, well, my end game is to work with animals, and safari is right there. So obviously I'm checking the safari box. They brought me back for an interview that same day. And within about 5 minutes of my interview, they said, yeah, we're definitely going to hire you.
Nice.
Even though I was grossly underqualified, what they did like was I was very outgoing, and that is something that I've always just been. And they also liked the fact that I was so willing to learn and just had a passion for nature. And so they brought me onto the team and were just like, hey, we'll just train you how to do it, but you have the stuff that we can't train.
You know, it's actually funny you said that. I can't really say where or how, but I literally was just approached and kind of pseudo offered a job. It was implied that I could have a job working with animals in a position that I have no qualifications for, but same thing. I'm good. I have the personality. I'm good at explaining things. I understand basic animal stuff. We can teach you husbandry. We can teach you basic training. So I do think that is a thing that I think, especially as conservation education becomes a more important part of keeping and other jobs, I think, yeah, the personalities are important. You can't learn that part nearly as easily as you can learn, all right, cool. I need to give them food twice a day. Got it.
Right. And for me, I have a very just optimistic disposition. And so because I've always wanted to work with nature and just in and around, and if it was natural, it was for me, right? But I did hit a ceiling. Your personality and talent only really gets you so far. What really gets you to the next level, to where you're able to have like full-time employment, I'd say, is you have to have the experience. That just can't be underwritten. And so what I did was, to be able to get more experience, I pinched my little pennies together from working 4 jobs, 9 a.m. to 3 a.m., Monday through Thursday, Friday and Saturday, literally not sleeping, working more than 12-hour days. And then Sunday, I'd get a lot of sleep. But I was able to pinch those pennies together, and then I was able to afford a trip over to Africa, where I was able to study leopards in Hwange National Park along with the research team, and also worked at an animal orphanage that I had learned about through some of my connections in AZA. And so because of that, I was able to get like a lot of experience really quickly. But it was interesting working so hard to raise like the amount that was needed to be able to take part, so that I could work my butt off in Africa. Like when I was there, I didn't even go on a safari. It was all about the work.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's really cool that you did that, though. Props to you. That's very cool. Yeah. So how long were you over in Africa?
I worked there for a little over 4 months.
Sheesh. That's serious. Yeah. That's real. That's very cool. And what did you take away from it?
I'd say my greatest takeaway was that there's a lot of nuance in conservation, that what you see on TV, they have to cut things down really quick and really small, so you don't really get all the particulars. I remember one thing that was really impactful for me was actually talking to someone who was a poacher at one point in their life, and them saying, hey, I didn't make a whole lot of money doing that, but it was more than I could make farming. And when you live around these large animals and they're in your backyard, it's a little bit different than looking at them from oceans and oceans away. But one of the biggest takeaways from my conversation with them was that these are people, and oftentimes these are people who are downtrodden and don't really have a whole lot of options, and that what we should really be looking towards in a lot of those conservation initiatives involving poaching is how we can work with the communities and de-incentivize the poaching as opposed to just saying, hey, poaching's bad and you shouldn't do it. Meanwhile, I'm hungry.
No, absolutely. I volunteer for Red Panda Network.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a great organization. And that's a big thing with them. They are focused on the community. And when I first found them through my love of Red Pandas, they were doing this thing where they were replacing stoves in homesteads in rural Nepal. And I got to tell you, my very uneducated, unaware brain was like, that is money that could go to pandas. Right. But what I quickly realized was that, and I mean, they explained it. This is how I realized it. They did a great job communicating it, was that, there were really bad stoves in the area that were causing forest fires and were wiping out acres of red panda habitat. And by giving these people new stoves, they were preventing that. They were also saying, hey, here are these stoves from Red Panda Network. Did you know that the red pandas that you see around here are really important? Here's how it ties into ecotourism. Here's how it ties, and making it about them. And suddenly I thought it was a beautiful thing. When at first I was literally like, we're buying stoves for people. That's conservation.
Yeah.
Okay. So I totally get what you're saying. And I do think that is often not communicated well. I think it's really cool, not only that you're sharing that, but that you got to experience it firsthand and hear about it.
It was pretty incredible.
Yeah. There's, I guess there's no conservation when you're hungry. Really.
Yeah.
I mean,
it all goes back to those hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And then from Africa, I came back because I've worked at a lot of different places. And one thing that I tell people about zookeeping is like, you better lace up your boots and be ready to travel because, you have to go where the wild animals are. And so from Africa, I came back to the States, and my grandmother, her health was actually failing. And so what I did was I moved in with her, and I'm from Philly. And so I worked at my home zoo, which was so incredible, the Philly Zoo.
Nice.
Which I have nothing but amazing things to say about. They're a partner of AZA as well, so they're really closely connected to the Maryland Zoo. So sometimes I get to talk to them on a professional basis again, which is cool. And I worked in education at the Philly Zoo. And then from the Philly Zoo, I interned at White Oak Conservation in Florida. And that was around the pandemic, once the pandemic started. And in between going from Philly over to White Oak, I wasn't sure if I wanted to also work with marine mammals at the time or just in marine animals at all. And so I pinched my pennies together again when I was working at the Philly Zoo, and I got on a research boat on the Great Barrier Reef. And so I was able to, right after that huge bleaching event in 2019, I was able to go over to the Great Barrier Reef and basically just lived on the reef for a month. We would go back to port every few days and then come back out, but it was diving 3 times a day to survey the reef.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was absolutely incredible. And it was so cool to see that the Passions of Paradise crew, even after I left and once the pandemic did hit, they were doing a lot of coral planting, and they were taking plastic off of the reef, which was, some of those things are just really close and near and dear to my heart because once again, the reason why I feel like I'm on Earth is for the preservation and proliferation of the natural world. And I want to share that love of nature with people and to actively save these places. And so to actually be able to go to these places that I've seen on TV and dreamed about since I was a kid and actually clean them and actually work to help preserve them was the actualization of years and years of just dreams.
That's absolutely incredible. That's very cool. And so, obviously, I've done some episodes about coral stuff and coral gene banking and all that stuff. Wildly important. But just like I asked you with Africa, what did you take away from your time in Australia? Once
again, that conservation needs nuance. And so one of the biggest things that they struggled with was the idea that the Great Barrier Reef was dead. And they were they hated when people say that. Because when you say that, what happens is people believe it. And then they think, well, if it's dead, we should go in there and take as much as we can from it while it's still here. We should extract as many different toys and trinkets from it. We should fish it until there's no more fish left because it's going away anyway. And so what it does is it stops people from caring about it. The Great Barrier Reef is about the same size as Germany. It's massive.
Whoa. Okay.
Absolutely massive. And so when you have something that's that huge it has a level of resiliency to it. And so climate change, the way I talk about it, is like, it's like a gun that has fired at the reef 3 or 4 times now. But the cool weather that comes after the summertime, it allows the reef to naturally heal itself. And so we should be working on conserving the reef, and we should be working on these programs to limit climate change, but we shouldn't be talking about these things as if they're final and as if they've already happened. Maybe that's the optimism in me, but I don't feel like anything is final until it already is.
Right. No, that makes sense. And honestly, I mean, if you don't have optimism when you're fighting climate change and when you're seeing what happens in this world, you are screwed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hands down.
Absolutely.
I'm glad that you have that, because absolutely. That is interesting, though. I think the nuance of communication is very important, and something I've had to learn to be careful with doing a podcast. You know, I used to be much more, much less careful, and would do some broad generalizations like, the Great Barrier Reef is dying, without thinking, because that sounds like an important message to me. If I hear that the Great Barrier Reef is dying, what it inspires in me is to do things to help. Right. But like you said, there are other people who will be like, oh, cool, let's move on. Like,
exactly.
All right. And that's important to understand. I appreciate that. Very cool. So, and then that brought you to
so after
Maryland,
that,
right?
yep. So I went to White Oak, and then from White Oak, I came up to Maryland because my brother actually lived here. And so I was, this is in the pandemic. And so a lot of places weren't hiring. And so I had some connections over here. And one thing that I will tell people is that this field is small. It's very small. Everybody knows everybody. So because of that, I was able to leverage some of my connections to be able to get a relief keeper position here at the Maryland Zoo, which absolutely changed my life.
Nice. How so?
So before I got here, I heard a lot of the stories that people tell about chimps, especially, are that they're these mean animals, hyper aggressive, or if you listen to a Joe Rogan, it's like, they kill lions. And that's basically the end of the conversation, right? Like, they talk about them as if they're these incredibly aggressive animals all the time. And while some of those stories do have some basis in truth, what a lot of people sort of obfuscate or don't really dive deeper into are some of these really complex, some of the more complexities of, just the troop dynamics and all the different emotions that they have. And so when I first came here, I was like, man, I never want to work with primates. But primate manager Pam, she basically told me, was like, hey, I know you've heard the stories. Just give it a try. And I was like, well, if a manager tells you to give something a try, you give it a try. And during that time, I learned so much about not just working with animals, but also a lot about myself and what I'm willing to do in certain situations. Once again, this is at the height of the pandemic, so everybody's masked up, and there's a lot of fear around, because these animals, whether we like it or not, they feel like coworkers sometimes. Like, they feel like part of your family a lot of the times. And so you're also not worried about just your family catching COVID. You're worried about your animals catching COVID too. And so during that time, everybody was, just really worried, and there was just a lot of anxiety. And it was really cool when I got there, because I'm like this bundle of energy and I'm super optimistic and I'm just happy to be there. And we also got in one of our a baby chimp named Maisie.
Yes.
And Maisie absolutely changed my life in many different ways, because she's a baby chimp who's orphaned by her mother, who's being introduced into our chimp society. And so she requires 24/7, 365, doesn't care if it's a holiday, birthday, snow day, whatever. Somebody needs to be here with me, and I need some bottles. And so because I was a relief keeper who got stationed in that area a lot, eventually I got roped into being able to be one of her caretakers. And that was just when I learned, like, hey, not only are chimps like all of these things that people say, or some, not all of them, but some of these things that people say, they do have some of these, tendencies, but they also are capable of all these other complex emotions and different sorts of it's hard to even put into words. And sometimes I do overdo it and people think chimps are on the verge of space technology by the time I'm finished talking about them. But they are just really complex individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense to me. And I mean, I think even moving away from chimps for just a second, we'll come back to that. But like, I think that's true of most animals. I think even the most simplistic animals, there's a lot more going on than we realize. And yeah, it kind of bugs me when people are like, "Oh, I saw a sea turtle do this once, so sea turtles do this." And it's like, okay, well, I could tell you a lot of things that humans do too, but doesn't mean you do them. Doesn't mean I do them. You know?
Exactly.
But yeah, I can't. Oh man, tell me what it was like with Maisie though, because I mean that was such a huge story, and it brought so many people so much joy at a time where there wasn't a lot of that going on. I followed that story, religiously. Like, yeah, tell me what that was like.
It was incredible. Here you are, like you're working, but your job is to take care of this infant, right? So there's an aspect of it that's like, okay, I cannot mess up. You know what I mean? Like this is a baby right here, you're solely responsible for the changing of the diapers. You're responsible for all the bottles. You're responsible for like, does she feel cold? Does she feel hot? Is she having a good time? Why is she crying? And so for me, it was almost akin to, I'm one of 10. I have 6 brothers, 3 sisters.
Whoa.
So huge family.
Okay, so you grew up in a zoo is what you're saying.
Basically, like there's a lot of us. And for a lot of my younger siblings, like I changed their diapers. I helped them when they were crying and I did all. And so it was like just a lot of connections were made between the being able to feel like this individual requires so much from me and I cannot mess up. And so what it did for me was it sort of opened my eyes to just how complex working with animals really can truly be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's really, really cool. So I have to ask, because I'm sure that, and I have my own opinions, but I'm sure that some of my listeners right now are thinking this, which is, okay, so you've been to Africa. You've worked with amazing species over there. You've been to Australia. You've worked with amazing species over there. You worked at the Philadelphia Zoo, White Oak, the Maryland Zoo with chimps. And now you're the manager of the Barnyard. You have goats and pigs. How does that feel? And are you still finding like joy and a way to connect with them?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny to me because people really sleep on goats until you're around them.
Right, goats are amazing. Let's
Goats
just say
are
it.
amazing.
They're amazing, yes.
So anytime you come to the farmyard, you are guaranteed an interaction with not just the animals, but also with someone who takes care of the animals, right? So you are guaranteed an opportunity to be able to pick the brains of a zookeeper who are the rock stars of the zoo. So for me, to be able to help facilitate those human-animal interactions and to be able to, one thing that I think zoos really do better than a documentary can do, better than reading a book can do, better than a television show can do, is that they can really give you that bridge between the general public and the natural world with nuance. You can ask every question you want to ask. You can not only ask those questions, but here in the farmyard specifically, you can touch a goat. You can see what another living, breathing animal talks. You can know exactly what they feel like.
Talk. They talk in their own way.
They do talk in their own way. You might hear some a little later on. But you can see exactly what they feel like. You can watch them roam around. You can ask whatever you'd like to do. And if it's somebody like me with you too, not only do you get to talk to them, you get to hear a lot from them because I can't stop myself from talking about them.
That's awesome. I love that you see it in that way, because so many people, I mean, even in the industry, so many people think about like, oh, I want to work with the most exotic animals. And like, I have zookeepers that are friends and fans of the podcast that are like, I can't believe that you've gotten to handle, red pandas when I'm stuck working with binturongs all the time, or binturongs when I'm stuck working with red pandas, like, whatever, And I'm like, yeah, no, but it shouldn't be about like how exotic and rare the animal is. It's just that they're cool animals. And I have to tell you, so I was here for Zoo Day with my wife, Zoe. And there's a video, if any of you listening haven't seen it, on my TikTok, there's a video of Zoe just sitting and being loved on by goats, and it's very adorable. But beyond that, the staff in the goat yard was incredible. I guess somebody there had heard about the podcast, and we started talking about it, and they really seemed to feel almost, I'm going to call it a need to lift me up and thank me and tell me like how much they appreciate what I'm doing, sharing y'all's stories and everything. And then we're asking me questions and like giving me suggestions. I mean, literally the entire team was like, reach out to our PR person. You need to talk to Mike. Like, we will talk to him for you, whatever. Like, it was just so beautiful. And they were such just wonderful people that I was actually pulled away from the goats to talk to them for a while. Zoe was not. Zoe was with the goats the entire time. I do the networking thing a little bit more. But like, it was really cool seeing how approachable the team was and how appreciative the team was. And by the way, this was right at the end of the day.
Nice.
So it had been all day that they were working.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and then my stupid butt comes in and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And they were still 10 out of 10, great level of energy, great just passion, introduced us to all the goats, were telling us about their personalities, you know, all that kind of stuff. And that was very meaningful to me. It was a very amazing ending to not just an amazing day, but honestly, an amazing conference.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I have to credit, you're giving too many accolades to me because I actually stole my technique for interpretation from one of my bosses. Her name is Jess Perantanu. She works over at the Odyssey Aquarium. So in between me over here as a relief keeper, I actually worked at the Odyssey Aquarium as the education supervisor. And she is one of the greatest bosses I've ever had. She was one of the people who I credit with my ability to go out there and before I engage with the public to take that breath, put on a smile, and then walk out and say every day is a good day, you know? And so she is a huge reason as to why I feel as though we can all really dig deep and really make those meaningful connections. You know, one thing that she always told to me is that, and one thing that I've always sort of felt was that everybody who comes to the zoo may not be able to afford to come to the zoo again, right? You might be engaging with a family who saved up their entire year, and this is the one family trip that they get to go on. You might be engaging with someone who just got out of the hospital and they're just looking for a break and a relief from what they've gone through. You could be talking to somebody who just lost an important family member to them and they're coming to their safe place, the zoo. And so for us, what I tried to always do and what she always taught me to do was to treat everybody as if they are the CEO. Treat everybody as if they mean something, because they do. We all do. And if you really care about conservation, you have to be able to connect these really important initiatives to the general public. And outside of even that, a step further is there are a lot of people who don't want to see zoos exist anymore. And so if we are to combat or to work with these people to sort of come to a different sort of compromising conclusion, we have to be able to articulate ourselves and our initiatives in a way that's fun, engaging, and involves the people. And you can't do that if when somebody comes in and they're like, well, it's a goat, does goat stuff, it eats over here, it poops over there. I don't know what you want from me. Have a good day.
I really, really love what you just said. All of that is so true. And it takes me back to, you know, some of my, I mean, when I was going through a major upheaval in my life, the Philadelphia Zoo was my refuge. I went there some weeks every day.
That gives
literally
me so much
every
love.
day. And that's actually when I fell in love with red pandas. You know, I know you've said I have episodes out. A lot of my stuff focuses on red pandas, right? A lot does. That's why I had seen red pandas before and I never connected with them. Like, whatever. They were cool. They were cute. Whatever. And then when I was in this like tough time in my life, I went to the Philly Zoo, and there were 3 pandas there at the time, and it was just one of them. I don't know why. Mei Lin, this old lady. And we became besties. I don't know that she knows that, but we became besties. And that changed everything for me. Yeah. That was what really made me fall in love with pandas, care more about conservation. All of that stuff happened, you know, but the reason I was going was just because I just needed to go. Like, I needed to be there. Yeah. And Mei Lin was my therapist. Yeah. Mei Lin was my best friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really, and if you would have seen me at the zoo, you would have never thought that. I'm not showing my emotions. I'm firing off wisecracks. I'm talking on the phone to my friends. You know, I looked like the healthiest, happiest, emotionally sound person. And at the time, and I was going through good stuff and bad stuff, but just a huge upheaval. And that zoo, you know, that was like the thing. You know, so it's interesting to think about that.
I relate so much to that. You know, I lost my father to a drunk driver in October.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
It was easily one of the most tumultuous times in my life, and even now I'm getting choked up even thinking about it. But I hadn't smiled since he passed until I came back to work. When I went. And I was with our goats, and I just sat in there petting the goats before we opened, and I was just talking to the goats, and I remembered it was Zod. He went over, and he just made a weird noise, and then he started like swinging his horns at one of the other goats, and I was like, Zod, what's going on? And then he walked over to me and let me pet him. And Zod, you know, I love Zod. He's not a bad goat. He's a good goat. But sometimes he can be one of the less diplomatic of goats. And sometimes he can use his horns instead of his words, which, you know, I understand. And so for him to allow me to pet him, it was just such a great feeling. And the manager team here was really in my corner. And so it just, especially Pam and Ryan, you know, everybody really just came together to support me in every way. And so it was just such an amazing, warm feeling to know that the zoo really had not just my back as a manager, but my back as a person.
And you weren't here that long yet either. Like you were saying, you haven't been here that long to begin with. That's really beautiful. Like, that's really cool to hear. It's not like you were you were obviously an important member of the community, but you weren't like established. You weren't here for 20 years. You weren't, and they all came together for you. That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm getting choked up thinking about it, man. These are my guys. This is my crew.
I always say that zoo people are the best people.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
It's true. All right. Well, let's not make you cry. So let's pivot for a second. You mentioned Zod. Tell me about some of the other more personable goats. Give me names. Give me personalities.
Oh, I gotcha. So Zod is definitely one of the goats that you will recognize immediately because he is dominating the hay feeders, right? But outside of Zod, I'd say another one of the more personable goats is probably going to be Java Bean. I love Java Bean. So one of my favorite goat facts is about how they discovered coffee. I am a registered coffeeholic.
So am I, and I do not know this story, so you need to tell me this.
Oh,
right
I'm here
now.
for it. So in Ethiopia, coffee grows wild. So the way the story goes is that a herder, he was walking his goats around, and goats, you know, they don't eat everything, but they'll taste just about everything. And so he saw that they tasted this strange red cherry. And after they did so, they would start pooping everywhere, and then they start bouncing off of the wall. So he was like, man, let me give this strange red cherry a try. So he gave it a try, and lo and behold, he got the energetic boost of coffee. And in Ethiopia to this day, traditionally, they actually drink their coffee with salt, milk, and butter. Tried it. Not personally my thing, but it's like one of those things that I understand why other people like it.
Sure.
It's like really dark salted chocolate. That's what it sort of reminded me of.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So Java Bean is definitely one of my favorite goats. Maybelline, just because she's so cute. Hoover, he's our painting goat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
nice.
Some of the people call him Hoover Casso or Vincent Van Gogh. Yep, he got a couple of nicknames going, and he works with Brandon in a lot of his painting. And so him and Brandon, who's his primary trainer, they'll go, and it was cool because they did it again for the first time after not doing it for a little while. And Hoover stepped right up like he was riding a bike and painted all over the canvas. It was really cool to see.
Oh, that's awesome. What kind of training do you do with goats?
Oh, I am so glad you asked that. So operant conditioning training, which is what we do all over the zoo, but it's basically what we want to do is ask the animal to do a behavior. If they perform the behavior correctly, or if they do it the way that they were asked to do it, they get a yummy and delicious treat. In the case of the goats, it's ordinarily Cheerios, but sometimes they'll also get their grain, which they absolutely enjoy. It's like goat candy. And they'll also get like sometimes some produce. But the way that we train the goats is the same way that we train all the other animals here. And it's a way for us to make sure that they're not just physically fit so that their muscles are encouraged to work, but also mentally fit so that their brains are working. Our behavioral team is incredible here. They work with all the different teams here, and they're always running around, and they give us a hand with working through a lot of the different training sessions that we do here. So that, let's say you are in a block and you're having issues with training a certain behavior, and you're like, man, for some reason, we just can't get past this hurdle. It's good to have a second set of eyes come in and who are amazingly intelligent people. Like, these guys blow my mind every time they talk. And they give you a second set of eyes to be able to work through some of those training sessions so that you can make sure that nobody's getting frustrated.
That's very cool. That's a lot of fun. I love the idea of a goat painting. That's so good. I have a whole wall of, it's like I was saying, it's all exotic stuff. You know, it's really cool birds that painted, and even a sea turtle flipper thing, and all kinds of cool stuff.
Oh, we're going to have to hook you up.
I think I need a goat painting. That just sounds awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So what else do you have in the barnyard?
So all throughout the farm, we have a bunch of different really cool animals. So we have our miniature donkeys, we have our Cotswold sheep, our alpaca, and they just got sheared. So I got to get some of those videos out to you.
Yes.
Because it's always so cool to see them get sheared. We also have our Kuni pigs, which are grazing pigs, and I love them. They are absolutely adorable. And pigs are so smart. They're able to solve complex problems at the level that's better than most dogs can. Pigs get a bad rap, probably because they roll around in mud. But I think that that's endearing. Yeah. And the last animal we have are the longhorn cattle, who you actually can only see from the train. So if you ever take the train ride, the first animal that you'll actually see are those longhorn cattle, who are kit, cat, and ox. Tongue twister.
Yeah, so that's cool. That's good to know, too, because I don't tend to ride zoo trains, because like a lot of zoos just have them for kids. But then sometimes they're a whole other exhibit. So like the fact that I've never seen those animals now makes me want to ride the train.
Oh, please do.
You know? Yeah, that's very cool. There are some places like Brevard Zoo in Florida. You literally get an entire different experience if you do the train. Including
Let me write that down.
Yeah, right? Including like free roaming zebra and stuff. Like, it's really cool. It's really cool. Yeah. Awesome. So, what's the goal? What's next? I mean, I'm sure you're enjoying being here, but you know, in the farmyard specifically, but what's next for you?
I'd say my dream, my goal, my passion has always been to be able to articulate complex conservation initiatives to the general public. So here at the Maryland Zoo, I'm being given a lot of different options to be able to exercise not just my ability to manage my different teams, but also to be able to engage with the general public in a more public forum, like not just giving keeper chats or doing like some of the bigger events, but also I get to do some of the like really huge events like Brew at the Zoo. I also get to get in front of a television camera all the time. So for me, what I see sort of as the next step here at the zoo is to sort of work on being able to do just more of the same, if I'll be honest.
That's great.
Load my plate up.
I love that. No, I love that. That's cool. When you find something, you know, that you love doing, yeah, keep doing it. Yeah. That's very cool. So, you know, I'm curious about something. You're a manager.
True.
And all you talked about this whole podcast so far, and I mean, admittedly, that is the focus of the podcast, but is animal and nature and animal and nature, right?
No doubt.
So then you become a manager. What did you do to build your management skills? And was there like a learning curve, or did you find it was something that you fell into naturally? Because leadership is definitely a skill.
Steep learning curve. Shout out to Jess again. I went over at the Odyssey Aquarium. I kind of was like, I'm going to fake it until I make it. And I was able to hone a lot of those skills from working day in and day out with Jess. But say I have a natural inclination towards management just because, being a part of such a large family. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's a middle child thing, but I've always sort of been in sort of leadership roles, like for my family. Like with big holidays, I'm like, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and I'll make sure everybody gets everything done. And so when we come together, we don't have to worry about like, where's the food coming from because somebody's been assigned, or where are the presents or the gifts coming from? Like somebody's been assigned. And so in being able to come to back to the zoo, and being able to manage the team that I had previously worked on, I had a lot of these different ideas. But the first thing that I wanted to do was to get to know the staff. That's where I'd say the largest learning curve for me is, because I never want to come into a place and like, everything you're doing is wrong. I'm going to change everything. Everything is going to be new. What I want to do is really get to know the people, get to know the area, get to know the runs a little bit more intimately. Like, what are some of the things that go good? What are some of the things that we could work on a little bit better? And from underneath of the tutelage of some of the managers who have been here for a lot longer than I have been able to sort of really gain a lot of really critical experience from working alongside them. The teams here, the way the management team is set up, is you never have to worry about being by yourself. Everybody has your back. I mean, not even just the manager team, but also the vet staff. Like, they're very open to explaining different things so that it's never like decisions are being made in a vacuum. Like, there's a lot of different points where everybody's able to talk to everybody and we all come to a compromise and some sort of solution together. And so there are absolutely still challenges. That's just in any job. But I tell people, it's like, yeah, but my challenges involve goats. So my challenges are better than yours.
Awesome. That's very cool. One quick question that I had before I get to that. You keep mentioning Odyssey Aquarium.
Yeah.
You're talking about out in Scottsdale?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. They've been on the pod. I love that facility.
I
That's
love
so
them.
Cool. I wasn't sure if there was another one or okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah,
Odyssey Aquarium out there. Yeah. And it was hot. Oh man, it was hot. Arizona gets all the heat. I'll say 70-degree winters though are beautiful. But Odyssey Aquarium is just another one of those places that really changed my life, it was my first management job, and I got to learn what it's like to be on salary and to, one thing that Jess always stressed to me that I was never good at, and I'm still not good at, is work-life balance. But when you love your job, sometimes it's hard to step away, especially if like, oh, we have a really big thing that's going on today. And so you always want to step in. And then to be able to come to the Maryland Zoo and to take those skills that she was able to teach me and to also take those principles that she was able to teach me. And I love fish and I love underwater stuff, but land animals are where I'm at, especially hoof stock. Oof, that's where I live. But to be able to take those principles and to apply them here has really given me a lot of, joy and just outright happiness.
That's really cool. I love that. And I love that it was at Odyssey because it's such a great place.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's interesting you talk about work-life balance because I struggle mightily with that. And
passionate people normally do.
Yeah, exactly. And actually what finally made me start to figure out the balance a little bit more was finding ways to be passionate about other things. Because growing up, all I cared about was drumming. Like my whole life, all I cared about was that, and then making it my career and sustaining that career and all that stuff. And it wasn't until I really got into all of the animal stuff and also got some people in my life who I was passionate about in a way that I'd never been before, that I suddenly was like, oh, wait, I'm sometimes like almost allowing like toxic situations with like my art and my drumming and stuff to persist, and I'm killing myself for this, but really I need to be giving over here now and over here now. But I never figured out how to do it other than by finding other passions. So it's still a thing that I struggle with. I just luckily have found some other passions, so I have a little more balance now.
Oh, you're lucky. I'm a one-trick pony, You want to know anything about cars or music, I'm no good. But if you want to know how long elephants are pregnant for, I'm your guy. 22 months.
I was going to say, I know you're going to drop it. That's awesome. Are there any specific conservation organizations you'd like to give a shout out to?
Some of my favorite conservation organizations, definitely Sandcob. We're really big partners with them here because we have a huge penguin colony, and they always need the extra support and the help. GB AZAC, they are our local chapter of the AZAC community. Shout out to them. AMZAP, they are one of my favorite groups. Shout out to Craig and Carolina.
So
yeah, that's my family down in DC.
Nice.
Yep.
I love Craig so much.
Yeah, that's my guy. That's my guy for real.
We've tried to get him on the podcast so many times, and nobody can figure out who to talk to at the Smithsonian. It's not even that they won't let us. It's that even Craig doesn't know who to talk to. So we've talked maybe about doing it as an AMZAP episode, because I did one of those when the organization first started with a couple other people.
Oh, I saw it.
Oh, okay. But yeah, and because I want him on so badly, and he lets me hang out with Binturongs there whenever I visit, like Hank and Lola. I love him. I love that place. And we have talked to so many people in the PR team, and they're all like, we don't really know who would sign off on this specific, a zoo podcast is very much its own thing.
It's so new.
I know. And I'm like, someone let me talk to Craig.
Yeah, Craig is really cool. Where else? Cheetah Conservation Fund, that's always a big one.
Yes.
Giraffe Conservation Fund, they're another big one. But really, I say the best thing that you can do is to come to the Maryland Zoo yourself. I mean, come here and just take a breath. Take a look around. Go and see the goats, see the animals, talk to the staff members. One thing that you don't really know until you just do it is an animal might touch your heart that you otherwise didn't even look at twice.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for people who are listening who aren't in the Maryland area, and especially for people who are out in the West and Midwest and stuff where states are big, like really, really big. It's worth mentioning that the Maryland Zoo is a great place to actually make a journey to. You can make a vacation, and you can hit within rent a car, and within 2 hours of driving, you can hit the Maryland Zoo. Mm-hmm. The National Aquarium is here in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. Brandywine Zoo is about an hour away in Delaware. Mm-hmm. The Philly Zoo is about 2 hours away from here. Adventure Aquarium in Camden is 2 hours away from here. Mm-hmm. Elmwood Park Zoo, you're maybe talking 2 hours and 20 minutes now. These are all accredited facilities. You can hit 7 just off the top of my head, and then going in the opposite direction because I'm just going east, but then we're close to the National Zoo as well. Mm-hmm. And there are a solid 8 facilities. You can make an entire vacation out of just coming to this area and hitting up all those facilities, which is not something that you can do when you're in some of the larger states.
I'm totally not biased, but Maryland should be your first stop.
First and last, come twice.
That's right.
Awesome. And then it is time.
It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show, but there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
All right. So, I'd say we were talking about this a little bit earlier. So I rank my poop stories.
Poop story.
So I'd say my first one would be dealing with elephant poop just because it's so massive. I was filming something back when I worked at my first job, and it was actually about elephant poop. And so I didn't know I was supposed to wear gloves. I actually picked up an entire elephant dookie, cracked it open, and talked about how elephants only process about 50% of what they eat. And everybody is just looking at me horrified. And I'm like, did I tell the wrong fact? I'm new, wet behind the ears, didn't know what was going on. So yeah, I think that video still exists on the interwebs somewhere, so you could probably find that. But I picked up a piece of elephant poop all without gloves.
Oh my gosh.
Yep, my mom will probably hate the fact that I have mentioned that fact.
That's amazing. Holy cow. Okay, cool. Well, that's great. I don't know why. I hear these every episode, but that one hit me hard. That's really, really funny.
Yeah.
I think especially just because you're so knowledgeable, and it just never crossed your mind to, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to go for the gold, I was like, man, the gloves will make the shot look bad. I don't know. I was young.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that you do. This podcast is truly important. You are giving zookeepers a huge voice, and I really don't think that can be overlooked.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, folks. Well, there you have it. Every day is a good day at the zoo, and every Tuesday and Friday are good days at the Rossifari podcast. I hope y'all enjoyed that one as much as I did. I'd like to say thank you to my Red Panda level patrons, Laura Shank and Stephen Williamson. And I would like to remind y'all that you can support the pod for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. We'll be back here on Friday for another episode of Rossifari Zoo News, and we've got some Conservation Tales episodes coming up soon, so lots of content coming your way. But before we get to that, it is my duty to remind y'all that the word credits backwards is Stider.
The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.